Hello again, my name is Seok-Chan Ko. In my first lecture, I tried to share with you my knowledge on the recent trends and their policy implications of science and technology parks of the world. Well, I wish you learned something from my first lecture. In my second lecture, I would like to discuss about the Korea Technoparks development process and their characteristics, including current issues involving them. In the first chapter, I will briefly review the history of Korea Technopark development, and then I will discuss the basic concept of Korea Technopark model in the second chapter. In the following chapters, I will describe the major characteristics of Korea Technoparks in terms of physical and the location and their functions. And then finally, I will discuss about the achievement of Korea Technopark and their recent issues surrounding them. As you can see over here, the Korea's transition toward the knowledge economy, we came a long way, starting from 1960s. And the development of Korea Technopark was started in the late 1990s because the Korean economy needed to be advanced and transformed into a knowledge-based economy. Rapid economic growth from the 1960s to the 1980s, the Korean industrial policy mainly focused on fostering import substitution industries and export with borrowed technology from other advanced countries such as United States, Japan, and Germany. Although the establishment of Korea Institute of Science and Technology in 1960s, and then Daedok Science Town development in 1970s, Korea faced the industrial decline started from the financial crisis in 1997. That's why we started Technopark developed in 1997. Since then, various projects have been promoted to transform into a knowledge-based economy, including the establishment of Korea Technoparks. Well, let me introduce other projects like Regional Innovation System building project and Research Center building project and Industrial Complex Cluster programs. All these projects were conducted to transfer our economy from factor-driven, investment-driven economy to innovation-driven, knowledge-based economy. The initiative of developing Korean Technoparks was started in 1995. KTP creation and operation project was planned and confirmed in 1995. But the real establishment of Korea Technopark project was started in 1997. And 6 target areas were selected to promote the pilot project in 1997. Well, actually, the government planned to select 2 areas only because starting establishment of Korea Technopark at the same time, too many of them was a great burden for the government finances. But the politics didn't let just select 2 of those Korea Technoparks. Finally, the 6 target areas were selected due to those regions here. So 6 front technoparks including Incheon, Gyeonggi, Daegu, Gyeongbuk, Chungnam, and Gwangju were created. So we call it a pilot and KTP project. And after that, in 1998, special law for technoparks were enacted. And then Korea Technopark Association, now it's called Korea Technopark Promotion Association, was established in the same year. The regions which were not selected for the first 6 the pilot project. And they started their own Technopark project that will include Busan and Pohang. So we call it private initiative Technoparks. But later on, the government recognized them and then started assisting financially. Okay, 13 strategic, 8 Technoparks right after that in 2003, 2005 at Chungbuk, Jeonnam, and Jeonbuk, Gangwon, Gyeongnam, Ulsan, Seoul, and Gyeonggi Daejin were selected and then started building the Technoparks in their own region. In 2007, the government was initiated a 13 strategic industry planning team for 5 years. And after that, they merged into this in the Technopark project. So the specialized centers were part of Technopark project later on. And in 2008, expansion and integration of regional innovation business in Daejeon area was recognized as Technoparks. So the number is increasing and in every year. And 2009, the second stage of KTP development was started. And then the Technoparks try to globalize their initiation experiences and then send their venture companies to overseas. In 2010, the Jeju Technopark was established by integrating the key existing high-tech centers. The 2 or 3 high-tech centers merged into one, and then the government recognized them as Jeju Technopark. 2018, the Sejong administrative city, the special city was established, and then the Sejong city wants to have a Technopark in 2018, so it was established in Sejong Special City. It's very new, the latest Technopark established in Korea. So overall, Korea has 19 Technoparks, and there are 17 metropolitan and provincial governments in Korea, but each one of these metropolitan and provincial government has 1 or 2 Technoparks. Gyeongbuk has 2 Technoparks, Gyeonggi has 2 Technoparks. And so, why did we create so many Technoparks, like 19? That's for balanced regional development. By looking at the history of Korean Technopark development, we started with building, first of all, the space creation. Well, now it's more than 20 years when we started building Technoparks. The Technopark building has progressed gradually through 3 different stages. The first, we started creating space. Second, and we established the organization. And then try to establish a networking. The 6 pilot Technoparks selected in 1998 proceeded in 3 stages in sequence. But the Korea Technoparks established in a later period promoted these stages simultaneously. If you look at these diagrams over here, you have to start with creating a space. If you don't have a space, you cannot put the functions or organizations. So the space creation comes first, mainly focused during this period over here, 1998 through 2004. And then you have to find the appropriate personnel who manage and run the organization, the Technoparks. So the organization building started in 2003 and then up to 2012. Now, finally, the original purpose of creating Technoparks is to assist small and medium companies in a region, or to assist and facilitate the startup and the spin-off businesses from the universities and the research institute in that area. So networking was the mission during this period, starting from 2013. Currently, 19 technoparks are established and under operation to promote regional strategic industry and facilitate the growth of high-tech venture businesses. As I already told you, the Gyeonggi and the Gyeongbuk provinces have 2 KTPs, while each one of the other metropolitan provinces has one technopark here. So up until 2017, the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Energy assisted the creation and the management of Korean technoparks. Now, the Ministry of Small and Medium Venture Businesses is in charge of Korean technoparks. That means the emphasis goes on from industrial development and a specific specialization of industries in each region, and then moves on to the assisting small and medium businesses. So there are some differences in their growth stages, depending on the operation period, industrial base, and cooperation and support from local government, and the level of technology in their core institutions. Korean technoparks have contributed to the growth of local SMEs. Well, I cannot say that all these 19 technoparks are successful and they are prospering. Some of them are still struggling and then in the early stage of development. But more than half of these technoparks are in a good shape, and they are prospering, and they are doing a very important function in their region. Now let's talk about basic concept of Korean technopark model. Why did Korea choose technopark model instead of a science park and research park? In my first lecture, I told you there's no big difference. But science park and research park are more concentrated on inventing a new knowledge and technology. And technopark is more oriented towards technology commercialization and more practical, the assisting practically to the small and medium enterprises. So let me now explain the basic concept of KTP again, and the reason why we chose the technopark here. And you can see, compare these two key features and cases. Science and research park, it's university research-oriented operation. And while the technology park is business-oriented operation. Science and the research park tend to focus on the research activities, and the technology park tend to focus on technology development and advanced production. Science and technology park emphasize the basic R&D, permitting only prototype development. But in case of a technology park, R&D, pilot production, technology and business consulting and marketing, and all these are considered to be important, so more practical. Science and research park has cooperative space for professors, researchers, and businesses. But in this case, the complex for research production and the commercialization. The best example might be Stanford Research Park in California, in the United States, and the Cambridge Science Park in UK. Stanford University and Cambridge University are far advanced in their scientific base and technology. So they choose this model. But compared to Science and Research Park, Technology Park, the case is Kanagawa Science Park in Japan, and Research Triangle Park in North Carolina may be the best example of Technology Park here. Korean Technopark is also different from industrial complexes that were built and operated mainly for production functions. There are about 360 national and local industrial complexes in Korea. many of them. So, compared to these industrial complexes, Korea Technoparks has buildings for various functions, not just for production, including incubation facility for new firms and technology transfer centers and or innovation centers, as well as a pilot production plant. So Korean Technopark tend to promote innovation cluster while industrial complexes promote agglomeration economies. The cluster and agglomeration is different. Well, I can explain the agglomeration is just a mere getting together, but the elements in that agglomeration complexes, they don't have interaction. But cluster, you think about the grapes, and they are connected, right? So in cluster, you have networks among firms and the research institute and then people. So the cluster is more advanced form compared to the agglomeration. Now, Korea Technopark originally started performing 6 basic functions designated by the central government. As you can see here, the 6 main functions are business startup support, and R&D, and education and training, and R&D commercialization, and industrial production, and then test bed. So this every technoparks in Korea are supposed to perform these 6 basic functions. Well, they can add to these 6 functions if they want. But KTPS performed additional functions too, including regional innovation hub function and the regional base function for business support. Recently, Korea Technoparks is considering to restructure the functions because the managers and then the tenants prefer business startup support and R&D commercialization, but they don't want to get some assistance about R&D and education training. Actually, R&D is performed in research institute and also education training. University has more specialty in this function. So the Technopark itself don't have to their own R&D function or education and training function. That's why they try to restructure those functions. And also recent research conducted by myself and found out the order of importance and the business support is the most important. And then R&D commercialization, the second, and test bed, while R&D and education and training are less preferred functions in Korean Technoparks. Okay, let's look up the organization characteristics of Korean Technoparks. In accordance with the standard articles of association enacted in 2008, Korea Technopark has an organizational system, as you can see over here. And the chairman of the board of directors, usually the mayor and the governor take in charge of this chair. And then there's a president. There's a board of directors and auditors, but the president is a major figure in managing the Korea Technoparks. And under the president, the policy planning team, which set the industrial strategy and the planning, and business support team, and their main responsibility is to assist companies in their areas. And the specialized centers. Well, actually, those specialized centers were established under different policies, but they merged in the Technopark, under the Technopark in 2008. Here's administrative support offices. So this is a standard form of organizational table. And now let's look at the number of specialized centers in Korean Technoparks. this is the current statistics in 2019. Well, 19 technoparks have total 52 centers, but the number are different. In case of Busan, has the largest number of specialized centers. It's 9, and Pohang has 1, and Jeonbuk has 1. So those 52 centers employ about 786 employees. Most of them are engineers and scientists. So those centers are contributing to the development of specialized industries in that area. The president of Korea Technoparks is responsible for the management of KTP, and the appointment and the dismissal of executives and the approval of the annual budget are determined by the board of directors. And the average number of regular employees in KTP in 2018 is 128. And with Incheon is the largest, 230, and the Seoul is the smallest, it's 49. So the size in terms of employees are different in Korea Technoparks, as you can see over here. Gangwon has 80 employees, and Gyeonggi Daejin has 62. Incheon is 203. The reason why Incheon grew so big is because they merged their research science centers and other economic related centers together under the Technoparks. That's why they have so big. Well, some of the Korea Technoparks are located on university campuses, but most of them are located near industrial complexes according to the regional industrial environment and the demands. So Korea Technoparks are generally composed of 3 or 4 buildings, including administrative buildings, looks like here, and then the R&D centers, and the pilot plant, and also the buildings for a tenant. With the recent expansion of functions, some Korean technoparks are expanding their spaces and facilities. So whenever they want to do that, and they ask the government more funding to buy land and to build those facilities. The Korea Technoparks vary in size, as I already told you, and the average site area in physical terms, site area is about 160,000 square meters. The total floor area, as you can see over here, the total floor area is about the 90% of floors are rented to more than 2,120 small and medium companies. And as this table shows you, the name of Technoparks and the site area, and you can see the site size of the site, and then building floor area. You can compare. They are not the same size, and they have the spaces are not the same. Until now, Korea Technopark has been intensively fostering specialized industries based on regional strategic industries designated by local municipalities. In the future, Korea Technopark will lead the growth and development of local industries and contribute to building a local innovative ecosystem. Now, let's look at the achievement side. For the last 20 years, they have grown in terms of physical size, functions, and finance, and manpower, and the total revenue, and contributed to regional national economic growth via expensive support to participating SMEs. Let's show you their performance during 2012 to 2018. The growth in terms of finance, manpower, and infrastructure, as you can see the table on this table. 18 Korea Technoparks provided services to almost more than 19,000 companies annually during this period. An annual average expenditure of Korea Technopark, and in 2012, it's 32.1 billion won. But it changed in 2018. It grew up to 54.1 billion won. Well, you can divide by this Korean amount of money divided by 111, and you can get the US dollar figures. Average 134 units of equipment for each KTP. Well, these equipments are very important. Testing equipment, and then all the manufacturing equipment for pilot plants, something like that. And they earned annual profit of 1.16 billion won. But this profit they are making not enough for the managing the science the Korea Technoparks. That's why they ask money to the local government and central government all the time, and they create many projects to get the funding sources. Now, let's talk about the problems and current issues of Korea Technoparks. I don't want to say that Korea Technoparks are very successful, and then we did all this establishing KTPs smoothly. We had problems, and still we are struggling and to solve these problems. Has KTP, Korean Technoparks, been an effective tool for the balanced regional development? Well, I didn't like the idea of creating so many. Well, I thought 6 or 7 is enough for Korea, because we have limited resources, land resources, and most of the population concentrated in Seoul metropolitan region. So just creating about 6 or 7 technoparks were enough. But some scholars argue that we need to have more in local areas for the balanced economic development in those areas. So 19 KTPs in different stages of growth and the prospect for future growth. Among these 19, the successful ones are located in the areas where industrial structure is equipped and then developed, and many companies existed areas. But the less successful technoparks are areas where the economy is decline. So, can creating one technopark in that area, can we solve the problem of economic decline? It's questionable. Too much central and local government control of the management of the KTP. Well, central government initiated this project to create and establish technoparks and then all over the country. Now, at the beginning, the government decided to assist those technoparks for 5 years financially. But after 5 years, the technoparks asking the central government, well, we cannot survive without your financial assistance. So the government is still giving the financial assistance to them. But in response to that, the central governments control those technoparks, what they should do, what they cannot do, something like that. So the technoparks are supposed to be separate entities, non-profit organization. They have their own autonomy. But under this government control, they cannot do whatever they want to do. So they're supposed to be an autonomous non-profit foundation, and they are complaining about too much intervention from central as well as the local government, and they don't like it. And financial issues, I already mentioned. Without financial support from the central government for the management of Korea Technoparks, are these technoparks sustainable? So that's the question we need to solve. Now, organizational issues. Internal conflicts among divisions and specialization centers. And there's another matter. Well, originally, the Technopark is supposed to assist small and medium enterprises in local areas. But now they have another team called the planning, industrial strategy and planning team. These two teams are competing with each other for the project. And the CEO is vulnerable to local politics. Korean Technoparks are evaluated every year. And according to the result of evaluation, the CEO of each Technopark might be criticized not doing enough. So the local governments and the central metropolitan governments wants to replace the existing CEO with another person. So that's the problem. Issues on regional governance and the networking hub. Too many similar organizations exist. Industry University Cooperation Foundation. That's the Ministry of Education started this building, this organization. They are competing to Technoparks. And the leading industries office, small and medium enterprises supporting centers, and the Innovation Center for Creative Economy, etc. Those organizations have similar functions to Korea Technoparks. So they are competing with each other for government project or repeating the same work done by others. So that's the problem. So how to organize this governance structure is our task right now. Competition for government project make it difficult for them to cooperate and to sustain in the future. Let me conclude with these words, a couple of words from my experience in consulting and then monitoring and reviewing Korea Technoparks for 20 years. Well, although Korea Technoparks achieved much, and then let's talk about future prospect. Korean Technopark model, I think, is a good example for technology-based economic development for developing countries. Why? Because it's central government initiated, and then most of the developing countries learn from us, and then their government, central government, initiated the same process. But the local government cooperation and then private businesses need to join this project. So I think our experience and the process of growth may be a good case study for your country. And we proved that Technopark model in Korea has the potential to lead the growth of small and medium countries. And then activate the regional economy by developing and commercializing new technology was possible in case of Korea. But I think you can replicate our case in your country. But you have to be very careful about when and how and where to start establishing your science and technology park. In case of Korea, achieving this potential in the future will require to enlist institutional leadership and community support and cooperation. Without community support and cooperation, the establishing Technopark project will not be successful. And access to sufficient capital for park development and management is important. And sufficient capital means the government subsidy or either central or local government. And you need to get the funding sources from private side too, from the beginning. That's important. Rearrange the functions according to the local needs. Well, we made the mistake to create and manage the Korea Technoparks and then to evaluate them. So what happened? All these technoparks becoming alike. Without, well, although they have different situations and the circumstances, the technoparks in each region becomes alike. So we thought, well, it's a problem. Okay? So rearrange the functions is very important. Each technopark needs smart specialization and financial autonomy in the future. But, well, a couple of Korean technoparks have financial autonomy, but most of those 19 technoparks are still in struggle in the managing with insufficient budget. So, this is the end of my second lecture, and I hope you learned something from the lecture. Thank you for your attention.